Hi, everyone. Wild claims that FBI agents planted evidence during the search of Mar-a-Lago. Dangerous accusations and an attempt to scapegoat agents on the ground doing their job. Why are so many now attacking law enforcement without any evidence to back up these claims? But first, a bombshell report today offering new details on the search of former President Donald Trump's Mar-a-Lago home. Government sources telling Newsweek magazine it was all about classified documents taken from the White House. And let me be clear. If this ends up being a search of the former president's home with nothing more than a violation of the Presidential Records Act, I think this will have been a huge mistake by the FBI. The reporter who broke the story will join me in a moment, along with a top former federal prosecutor. The Newsweek exclusive by William M. Arkin says that Monday's search was based largely on information from a confidential FBI source who identified the classified documents the former president was still, they said, hiding, and the location of those documents as well. A source says the affidavit to obtain the warrant contained details that Trump still had records, a violation of federal law, and even said which safe the documents were held in. A Trump attorney says the FBI searched a bedroom, an office, and a storage room in Mar-a-Lago, suggesting agents knew exactly where to look. President Trump said in a statement that the FBI opened his personal safe as part of the search. The search was timed for when Trump was away to avoid giving him a platform and to try and downplay the search. That part of the plan obviously failed. We've seen widespread backlash from Republican lawmakers and Trump supporters over the search. Two government informants told Newsweek that the search wasn't political, with the Bureau's only intent to recover highly classified documents that were illegally taken from the White House. According to one, quote, even though everything made sense bureaucratically and the FBI feared that the documents might be destroyed, they also created the very firestorm they sought to avoid. You think? I mean, I'm going to reserve judgment until we know exactly what these documents were. But on its face, this doesn't sound great. And here's another critical item from the article. A senior Justice Department source says Attorney General Merrick Garland did not know about the date and time of the search and was not asked to approve it. The source says it was a matter for the U.S. Attorney and the FBI. FBI Director Christopher Wray ultimately gave the go-ahead for agents to proceed, according to the article. Now, that is astonishing to me, and to a former U.S. attorney who also worked as a senior aide in the Justice Department during the Trump administration, Richard Donahue, said this on my radio show this afternoon.
I find that a little bit hard to believe. I think that the investigations are driven in the first instance by the prosecutors and agents who are working the case, for sure. But a matter that is this high profile and this high stakes, not just for the department, but the country, would have to be elevated to the Attorney General. The Attorney General should certainly be taking extreme interest in that, and I think would be fully briefed up with a minute-by-minute update.
It's difficult to comprehend how the Attorney General would not have approved this search. And if he didn't approve it, and it does end up being a relatively minor record-keeping violation, then heads could roll. But on this show, we wait for evidence and facts before drawing conclusions, and we will continue to do just that. Joining me now is William M. Arkin, Newsweek senior editor and author of the Bombshell Newsweek article. Thank you very much for being here. Appreciate it. So what surprised you most in your reporting about this story?
Well, once it was explained to me, both the efforts on the part of the FBI to make this extraordinary act a non-political act. So let's put aside for a moment whether they're tone deaf or not in believing that they could have achieved that goal. But once it was explained to me by my sources that they didn't want the White House to know the date and time or anything about it, they didn't want the Attorney General to be put in a position to approve it. He was briefed, obviously, on the grand jury investigation, briefed on the reason for pursuing a search warrant in the first place. But I can understand the logic, which would say if we are truly going to say that this was a non-political matter, having the Attorney General, quote, approve it or not approve it, as opposed to telling the Attorney General that it's going to happen, makes some internal sense to the bureaucracy.
Maybe. I get the part about the White House, right? I get the part about keeping President Biden out of the loop on this. I think that they had to do that for exactly the reasons you're laying out. But the problem is that so many people I'm talking to who've worked in the Department of Justice have said they just find that impossible to believe. You believe that your sources would know when they said that Merrick Garland wasn't approving it?
Well, my sources are good, and I know these sources and have known them for quite some time. I don't think they have any reason to tell me something false. It wasn't particularly surprising to me once they explained it. Again, Merrick Garland knew about the grand jury investigations. He knew about the ongoing negotiations between the National Archives and the Trump camp. He knew about the FBI investigation. He even knew that they were seeking a search warrant. But on the details of approving the specifics of the raid, the date, the time, and even whether or not they would undertake a raid, that was left to the U.S. Attorney and to the federal magistrate who ultimately approved the search warrant.
All right, the date thing I can accept, but when you say that Merrick Garland knew about it, that's got to implicitly mean he's approving it, right? I mean, if he knows about it and he doesn't object to it, he's obviously signing off on it.
I'm not trying to evade the answer here, Dan. I think that the reality of the bureaucracy is sometimes you don't ask the boss for his permission because you don't want the boss to have to say, I approved this raid. You want to say that I left it to the investigators and the judge to make that decision.
Yeah, I hear you. I've got another question for you, but I want to bring in former U.S. Attorney for the Middle District of Georgia, Michael J. Moore. Michael, your reaction?
Well, I'm glad to be with you both, and I just find it that it just defies credulity to suggest that the Attorney General did not know the details of this. It scares me to death, to be honest with you, to think that the United States Attorney in a district, one of the 94 districts around the country, would make a decision about whether or not to execute a raid or a search on a former president's home. And it's not necessarily this circumstance that gives me fear. It's what happens down the road in the next administration, and, as people move forward. So it just strikes me as odd. There's a section at the Department of Justice, the Public Integrity section, in their memos that are put out routinely and re-emphasized by incoming attorneys general that essentially say that if you're going to undertake some activity that may have political implications, especially as it gets closer to election time, that you're to notify the main justice and to let them know. And they tell you that as the United States Attorney, that you're to in fact advise them of what's going on. And so it worries me a little bit to think that the argument could be made, well, we didn't know. I don't think that this is a circumstance where we should have just plausible deniability on the part of the Attorney General. I understand the president would not be involved, and I think that that's right. I think that the executive, the chief executive, would not be controlling and pulling the strings of the Department of Justice.
Bill, you wanted to respond?
Yeah, but I'm concerned about
there's no response to make. I mean, I know as much as it is known. I think what's important to point out here is that we've actually seen this happen once before, which is the case of James Comey going before the news media and delivering a political bombshell that may have influenced the 2016 election when he talked about not bringing charges against Hillary Clinton, which most people took to mean that there was something that she had done wrong. Yeah. And so the FBI didn't ask the Attorney General. They didn't check with anybody before they did that. And
he was excoriated. He was excoriated for that. I mean, it was viewed as sort of heresy that he did that, right?
That's not the United States Attorney. There's a chain of command for the United States Attorney. It's the President, the Attorney General, and the United States Attorney. And so he acts, or she, if it's the United States Attorney acts on behalf of the Attorney General. And so I would be shocked that there was not some discussion at the line with the deputy or the Attorney General.
Real quick, Bill, I just want to understand, again, this is a big scoop that you had at Newsweek magazine. This was all about a Presidential Records Act violation that they went in there on?
My understanding is that the grand jury looked at both the violation of the Presidential Records Act and the unlawful possession of classified national defense information. Those two might be separate. It's a question, first of all, the referral from the National Archives, which asked the Justice Department to look into whether there was an illegality. And then second, whether as part of the investigation they didn't discover enough information to indicate that the Trump camp was hiding classified documents that it had taken from the government.
Michael, I've got 30 seconds. You got a final thought on that?
Yeah, I expect the grand jury may have been looking at it. I would be surprised. That makes me all the more surprised if this was not run up through main justice, if in fact that was the case. But I'll tell you, and I agree with one thing that you said, we've got to know the facts as they come out. But if this turns out to be a search for an overdue library book, basically, then it's going to be a black eye for someone.
I agree with you. I agree with you, but we shall see. William Arkin, congrats on the big story in Newsweek magazine. Michael J. Moore, thank you very much for coming on the show. Appreciate it. We shall see. That's the most important thing. And that's why this next segment is important. Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find NewsNation on your cable provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.